Hello guys, welcome back. So somebody asked me a really good question yesterday, so I thought I'd make a video to answer it. Some of you will kind of know this, and some of you, since you're newer viewers, you never heard me talk about this before. Someone asked me, well, did you ever have any bad experiences with Jesus? Oh yes, I grew up Roman Catholic. And I grew up Roman Catholic in a Roman Catholic church that you had priests that absolutely hated children. Hated us with a passion, wished children did not exist, thought that children were evil, dirty, sinful little balls of hell spawn that should be blotted out of existence, and would have beat us all to death if only they could, but they, at the time already in the 80s, they weren't allowed to really hit kids. So, you could still get hit in a public school, but, priests and nuns and everything, if you weren't going to a regular Catholic school, weren't allowed to bat you around. They had to be nice to you, okay? And at least that's the way it usually worked. But if they weren't going to be able to physically hit you, they were going to verbally hit you. And they'd bring all the little kids into, the church. And we're talking about kids like around kindergarten age, maybe a couple years older, and they'd roar at you and they tell you how bad you are and how much God hates you and how Jesus is going to come down off of that cross and get the whip they beat him with, and he's going to whip all your little asses for you. No, they wouldn't put it quite in that language, but they'd be like, yeah, Jesus coming down off the cross and he's going to beat you. And you'd get CCD teachers that would say, Jesus is going to nail you to the cross, and and Jesus only suffered and died because of you specifically. This is all your fault. You should feel ashamed. And kids usually really aren't that bad. They can be hell on wheels at times because they're children. They haven't learned self-control yet. But when you take children that are otherwise innocent and pure and you keep telling them week after week after week, you are bad, you are evil, you are sinful, God hates you, after a while, they stop trying, right? And your parents wonder why you don't want to go to church. Who the hell wants to go see a God who hates you, is going to come down off the cross and beat you? And you would tell your parents this, and you were probably being a typical kid and getting on their last fucking nerve, during the week. So you would tell your parents this, and your parents would be like, uh-huh. Or maybe they'd be a little mad, but if your parents were Catholic too, they never contradicted what the church said. I didn't have parents like that. I had parents that whatever the church did was fine by them. So, of course I would have nightmares where Jesus would come down off the cross and beat me, and God was a monster, and God was out to get me. And then, we kids started to experience Jesus, but not the Jesus of the church. This wasn't the Jesus of the church that was going to come down off the cross and beat our ass. And we started to experience God, but this wasn't the God of the church that had this big old fire pit ready for us if we ever pissed him off or we missed confession or something. We experienced a Jesus of love and we experienced a God of love. And being children, you would go up and you'd be real excited and you tell a priest or you tell an adult and you'd say, God is love, Jesus is love, I talk to him. Now, keep in mind, most people giving religious instruction, unfortunately, don't believe a damn word they're saying. They do not. They would tell you, sure, pray to Jesus, pray to God, he'll hear you and answer you, but they really don't believe it. They were broken by the system already, but this is frankly, they think it's horseshit, but this is frankly the horseshit they got to tell you, okay? And, you would have embittered teachers saying, well, if God answers prayers, he hasn't, whatever, whatever. And you would have adults not realizing that children understand more than they think they do, talking about yelling at their own kids or having a drinking problem or something else. All this stuff that, I get it, nobody's perfect, but that was hardly an environment for children. But we'd be trying to tell these teachers that God is love and Jesus is love and everything else, and they just weren't having any of it. They would shut you down. We did have a good priest at one time, and he didn't last terribly long because he used to like to play with us kids, the CCD kids, and he would come on to they had a sound system in the school, and he would say, this is God speaking. And then he'd tell us jokes and everything else, and God came on the speaker system more often than not, told us silly jokes and told us stories and told us what God was doing in heaven. And you can imagine how a bunch of rampant militant Catholics, because those are always the kind that teach CCD, reacted to that. They freaked the fuck out, and the priest was bounced out. He was one of the decent priests. He wasn't bothering kids or doing anything else. He was one of the good guys, but you can't have that in the Catholic Church. So, I did have for years, and even to this day, because they make sure it's like planted in you from day one, even from like God knows what they tell you when you're a baby. Um, Even to the day, have that kind of reaction, because especially, you see that's alive and well in a lot of forms of Christianity. But yeah, I had nightmares. I even to today, I sometimes have this kind of look at Jesus with one eye, kind of like, what are you doing? And that's not the Jesus I ever experienced. I've never met the whisperer crazy version of Jesus. I don't think he exists. I don't think the churches or most established religions version of God exists, because he's usually a bastard that's scary, and he's usually out to get you. You cannot both be, and I can't emphasize this enough, a God of love or Christ of love or a Jesus of love, however you see him, and be coming back to whip people in the ass. You can't be both. You're either unconditional love, which means you love people no matter what, and there's no Bernie place waiting for them, or you're really mean and vengeful. And a lot of people try to put both of those together, and they end up getting this kind of, bipolar God who loves you today, but he's going to burn you tomorrow because he's just not right in the head. So, and the whole Bible was written that way. You had half these people writing about a God of love, and you had half the people writing about this scary God that was going to drop you in a fiery pit. And probably what it was is like every other religion in the world, they were drawing on all the gods in the religions before them. And so you end up with this very bipolar deity that, he loves you today, but tomorrow he's mad. He's giving you blessings today, but tomorrow he's cursing you. And a lot of people buy into that. But thankfully, the God in Jesus that I worked with and I occasionally go home and visit, they're not like that. One second, guys, these allergies. Sorry about that. And, our gods too, sometimes we have a lot of stuff to work out with them too. And I have been going through that process with Odin. Gods know Odin is presented as a scary monster in most pagan circles, and that's why a lot of people hate the old man. His stories are no more gospel than the Bible is. And he is a god that if you see a big scary monster and he wants to work with you, you'll be like, well, okay. That's really not his true nature. His true nature is rather more towards kind. But yeah, is there a word deity in there? Yeah, there is. And yet, the more you work with him, if you don't need a word deity, you're going to end up getting more towards the Oski end of the spectrum. It's just Odin would be the first god that if you wanted scary and terrifying, and that is the only thing that got through to you, then yeah, he would. And in our relationship, he'll give me what I'll accept. If I need the kind of teacher that, like in the martial arts, they're always smacking the student and, smacking them upside the head or something, or making them carry water or something like that, then that's what it'll be. But if I can do it the nice way, I don't know how many times he's told me, if you would just do this nice, gentle way, we would go that way. Loki's the same way. If you can only see a big, scary teacher when he arrives in your life, you're going to go through that period where just like I was terrified of Jesus, you're going to be terrified of Loki, and then eventually you're going to come out the other end. Now, this doesn't mean that because I suddenly let go of my fear of, say, Jesus or Loki or Buddha or Odin or the tree outside, that I then ran rampant doing everything I know very well to be wrong. I don't get to go steal all the stuff my neighbors have and I've always wanted. I know fundamentally that's wrong, because my conscience is like, you probably shouldn't be doing that. It doesn't matter if you're Christian or not. It doesn't matter if whatever or not. No, the gods aren't going to abandon us if we did, if we went on a spree, because we're like, ha, the gods will never abandon me. But, it sets us back. And it's more a thing of then we have to apologize to the people around us. You want good friff. You want to get along with the people around you. You don't want to be antagonizing them. And, one thing we do, spirituality, is we only worry about our relationships with the gods and getting, in a good relationship with the god. And then, how are we treating the people around us? at the very least, leave them alone if you can't do anything else. But, be civil towards people, be nice towards people. Do stuff that as a society we have agreed upon that are nice, and don't do the stuff as a society, as cultures we've agreed to almost universally that aren't nice. Not too many people want to be stolen from. Not too many people want their houses set on fire. You know not to do that stuff. Just because you might believe in the unconditional love of your God, you don't want run rampant. But once we get that impulse out of us too, because sometimes you're like, oh, I'd totally be forgiven for this. We all fall short. Apologize. Most people aren't going to go to those kind of extremes, but you know what I mean. Once you fall short, apologize. Apologize. There's no Bernie place waiting for you. There's no bad punishment, especially most of the pagan religions and faiths. There just is no bad place waiting for you. There is kind of almost universally agreed a place for the very worst of the worst. And I mean people like say Hitler or something like that. There is a place to put them where they will learn whatever lessons they need, and it's kind of like a supermax daycare center for the very worst. And they're not going there so much as a punishment. They're going there because they're so broken that when they arrive on the other side, they're like, okay, we can't put you in the general population. You're going over here. We're not going to torture you because it's not going to help. It's just going to make you worse. But you got to go over here, and the torture they're going to go through is kind of self-imposed torture because all the stuff they did during their life, they're going to have to work their way back from that. That's the painful part. That's the mean part. But it's all stuff we impose on ourselves. So that's just my view. You can agree, you can disagree. But yeah, I definitely had bad experiences with Jesus, and I had recently had a freak out actually last night, and it was nothing about Jesus. I just think the bedroom was too warm, or maybe it's 2020, I don't know, but you guys know, every night I talk to the gods, I talk to whoever I think I need to talk to, or whoever feels like wants to talk. And I went to bed feeling fine, and I woke up as I keep waking up 4 or 5 times a night now lately, I don't know why. And I felt this fear of Odin or all the gods or somebody was just going to grab me and drag me off somewhere. To hell, to under the bed, to I don't know, but it was just that panicky thing that sometimes when the gods are near you and you are like a little too open because you're like just asleep or something. It was that panicky mindless terror we can get. I've had that reaction to gods before where I'm meditating, and as I call it, they don't put their human skin on. They don't kind of turn the dial back down far enough. They really don't realize that you're aware of their presence. And they come close and you start to panic and flail because you're not even sensing their full power, and you're panicking and flailing, and they're like, what's the matter? And because you're afraid, they come closer because they want to help, and you're like, ah. And I think that's what happened. It was just Odin or someone was in too damn close a proximity, having forgot to put their human skin on and was looking real close, and it terrifies us out of our minds because we're not at the stage yet where we're used to that. Eventually we will be. Eventually humans won't see them and go, and run. But, until then, it'll all be okay. So I just figured I'd make that video with you because, yeah, I was terrified of Jesus. Being Roman Catholic is you're bad. You're probably going to burn in hell. You better find an angel or a saint that'll intercede for you. And everything you want to do is wrong. Absolutely everything. Wearing decent clothing is wrong. Being healthy is wrong. It's really weird. If you're sick and you're suffering, it's because Jesus thought you were a bad person. You should thank Jesus because you're sick and you're suffering, and you're sharing in his suffering. It's all about suffering, in case you haven't noticed. And every bad thing that happens to you, every pain you have, is God's judgment and punishment on you. And, God's basically this bowl of wrath and hate and rage, and every bad thing that happens to you have coming. And if things are hard in your life, it's because God's pissed off with you. It takes a while. It takes a while to get all that programming out of you and be like, God's actually not that crazy. Maybe you should stop reading a 2,000-year-old collection of just this little, like literally 2 lines here or 2 lines here, and somebody shoved them together into a story. then that is exactly why the God of the Bible is so bipolar, because these people have the nice version of God and these people have the wrathful version of God, and you can't do that. You can't, well, you can, but then you end up with this bipolar character of God who one moment is drowning everybody on the planet, and then the next moment is weeping bitter tears and like, I shouldn't have done that. Well, you should have thought of that first. And it's why people, especially atheists, love to run through the Bible and go, well, if he's all knowing, how come he did all this stuff? Because you're not supposed to look at the text that everybody's squished together and get your impression of God from that. That's not really good. It's a story of collection of divinely inspired at best stories, personal gnosis, if you like, that was all thrown into a blender, and most of these stories don't belong together. They were never meant to be read as a book from the beginning of the world to the end. They were never meant to be read like that. And if you try, that's why you end up with this bipolar, despotic God. And Jesus is kind of bipolar in the Bible too. One day he's preaching about love and peace and, everything else. And all of a sudden he gets kind of twitchy and he's talking about making swords and everything. And everybody's like, Jesus off his medication again. Well, if you go and you look, not Christian historical time, a lot of times emperors and everyone else, especially in the Roman Empire, how the Romans tended to be, wanted a more militant, wanted a more strong, wanted a more merciless religion that fit in with their idea of, we will use this religion to crush you. It's why we have separation church and state now, or we should. So, if it gives you any comfort at all, but Jesus before all this garbage and hate and intolerance and the church doing all this stuff was dumped on people. Before that, he was a rabbi, son of God, however you see him, that spoke of peace. There are books out there. I'm not going to recommend books, but there are certainly books out there by progressive Christians, and there are books out there for pagans about Jesus, and not to convert people, to just have them come to peace with the idea of the religion they probably grew up in. And, there are a lot of progressive people going back through and saying, hey, Jesus never said anything about this. Jesus never said anything about that. Jesus really, he never asked for worship. And you can take what you're comfortable with, and with stuff that goes against your beliefs, you don't have to take it. But there are plenty of books out there that they're like, Jesus, he never taught about original sin. He didn't believe in original sin. It wasn't a concept at the time. The church didn't even have, because remember, Jesus was not a Christian. He was a Jewish person, though some people debate that too. And Jesus wasn't a Christian. There was no church there. There was no idea of hell. These weren't people back then living like, say, Catholics or Protestants or Lutherans or whatever today. There was no concept of hell. The hell of the Jewish idea was, it could be really conflicting and confusing. If you were really, really good, you got to go to heaven and be with God, but most people, once you died, that was kind of it. There was no underworld that they were wandering around in all eternity. So I hope that kind of helps, and I hope that answers the question. But if you guys like what you see, like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you later. Bye-bye.